Now that the Awakening of the Rebellion 2.9 update is well underway, we wanted to focus on something not many people are covering, the model updates. Yes, just like the video we did on Thrawn's Revenge, we'll be going over all the ship model updates that have come to Awakening of the Rebellion 2.9 and comparing them to their older 2.8 versions. There's about 30 different ship changes to get through in this video, so I'll keep it short. All I ask is for you guys to hit that like button and let me know your favourite ship change in the comments down below. Besides that, let's get right into the video. First up is the TIE Fighters. Whilst this new design does look a little similar to its old one, this is likely contributed to the fact that the model is so small that you don't necessarily see it unless you're in cinematic mode. This will apply to all the other fighters that we cover in this video, but as you can tell, the wings of the TIE Fighter definitely look a lot less black and more grey matted. This is likely to keep it closer towards the Awakening of the Rebellion standard design that we all know and love. Next up is the TIE Interceptor. Here we can see the TIE Interceptor has a much more softer design compared to its old one, and looks like it holds more of a Star Wars Squadron style to it. Besides the colour changes, there isn't really that much in texture design changes in this one. Next up is the TIE Brute. Now I'm unsure if this is a new ship or not. We were unable to find older designs in 2.8, but here you can see it's a modified TIE Fighter. Despite these fighters being so small that you won't really get to see them properly in game, it's awesome to see the Awakening Rebellion team actually put this level of detail into something you might not necessarily see very often. The same goes for the experimental TIE M1, 2, 3 and 4, all sporting very strange TIE Fighter designs that a fair few people might not actually know what these ships are. But all of these have big design changes from the standard TIE Fighter, TIE Interceptor and TIE Bomber. Again, we couldn't find any of these designs in 2.8, so these may be new ships. That was the last of our fighters for this list, so up next is the ARQUITENS light cruiser. Acting as escorts and fire support for the Venator Star Destroyers, this ship gets a whole new texture redesign, taking on a much more grittier, detailed Awakening of the Rebellion style with coloured rims at the end of the ship. The engine particle designs stay the same, but ultimately we're pulling away from the odd black outline design seen in the older version in the ARQUITEN. The ship comes in at 1,300 hull and 1,200 shields. Next up, the ship everyone wants to know about, the Imperial Star Destroyer. At first glance, you might think this ISD hasn't had any changes, but compare it to the old version, we can see that the new one has a lot more shaded detail in the top of the hull. Whilst it is still the same model per se, this is quite important for the rest of the Star Destroyer lineup that we'll see later on in today's video. Either way, this design change gives the ISD just a little bit more detail and gives a lot more texture to the standard iconic ISD look. Another big change coming in this update is all the stat changes that come to Star Destroyers, because the Imperial Star Destroyer 1 comes in at 20,000 hull and 12,000 shields, giving it a much bigger buff compared to its 2.8 version. Next up is the Imperial Star Destroyer 2. Now this is where things start to make a bit of sense, because the Imperial Star Destroyer 2 now looks a lot similar to its older brother. In the old version, it had a much darker shade of grey. That, including a bit of a size change, really made it very different from the ISD 1 compared to the ISD 2. Here in 2.9, it looks like they're trying to bring the ISD 2 and 1 much closer together by removing the metallic look of the old ISD 2 design. Still using the same model and size, they're still able to replicate a noticeable difference between the two ships while still keeping them in the same lineage. Alongside that, the buffed ISD 2 comes in at 22,000 hull and 15,000 shields. The Texas Star Destroyer shares a very similar texture design to the ISD 1, compared to its old version, which pretty much looked like an ISD from 2.8. The only differences here is that its hangar bay and its power systems are removed in this model. The reason for this is that the Texas Star Destroyer is designed for ship-to-ship combat, removing all unneeded elements for more turbo lasers. The big weakness to this ship is that it needs to be escorted with other fighters to protect it from bombing runs that could absolutely cripple it. The ship shares its stats with the standard ISD 1, which is 22,000 hull and 12,000 shields. And the last of our Star Destroyer designs is the INTERDICTOR Star Destroyer. With Rebel forces finding new ways to neutralize immobilizer cruisers, the response by the Empire was to create the INTERDICTOR Star Destroyer, using the hull of an Imperial 1 and combining it with the utility of the immobilizer. The big visual design change of the INTERDICTOR is the 4 huge gravity well generators in the back side of the ship. In Awakening and Rebellion 2.9, they take a standard ISD-1 design and place the 4 spheres accordingly. In the old 2.8, it looks like they used a much older ISD design from an older version of the game, and added gravity well generators that just didn't look that right. In this version, it is definitely a much more standardized design now, making it a lot more identifiable in the Imperial Star Destroyer lineage. Much like the Imperial Star Destroyer 1, it shares the same hull and shields, which is 20,000 hull and 12,000 shield. Next up, we have the Arc Hammer. The Arc Hammer is a gigantic factory ship, and in the heat of battle can produce astronomical amount of automated fighters, mostly TIE droids from the TIE experimental line. This ship has seen a huge design change. It's much bigger than its old version, and a lot boxier too. The old design was very gritty and very dark, whilst the new design goes for a more monotone grey. This is one of the biggest model changes for ships in 2.9, and it honestly looks great. Not only that, the Arc Hammer has had a huge buff, with its hull being at 60,000 and its shields being at 40,000. Next up, we're moving to the New Republic. Compared to the ISDs that we saw earlier, the New Republic have much more noticeable ship changes, both to their models and to their textures. So first up is the MC-40A destroyer. Unlike large Mon Calamari ships, the MC-40 destroyers are more focused on offense than defense. But what I can say is that this is a huge upgrade visually. There's so much detail to this new model compared to its old one, which was very basic. From the hangar bays to the ship lighting all the way to the engines, everything is completely new and looks so much better. So big shout out to the guys at Awakening and Rebellion. This is a great change. The ship comes in at 3,500 hull and 6,000 shields. But the ship design changes of New Republic only get better with the MC-60 Cruiser. This is a big model change, changing the placement of the engines, adding a lot more texture to the hull, and improving those hangar bays throughout. One thing you'll notice with Awakening Rebellion and New Republic ships is that they do like to make the ships look very worn and gritty, compared to the more Clone Wars style design that you see in Thrawn's Revenge, but that's just personally my opinion. Either way, the MC-60 Cruiser looks fantastic here, and definitely brings the Mon Calamari ship lineage up with all the other ship design updates. The ship comes in at 8,000 hull and 10,000 shields. And for the last of the Mon Calamari ship updates is the MC-80 Justice. The MC-80 Justice is a specialized battle carrier which carries supplies to repair and power up its fighter loadout. However, its weaponry is minimal for a ship of its size. Sporting a bluer tint to its hull design compared to the others, the MC-80 Justice looks absolutely fantastic in this update, and really goes to show just how much the Mon Calamari line needed an update. Besides that, the MC-80 Justice comes in at 12,000 hull and 14,000 shields. Next up is the Quasar Fire. The Quasar Fire has huge open hangars which can deploy multiple waves of fighters at once, which allows the Alliance to maintain fighter superiority throughout a battle. I think the Quasar Fire was one of the biggest changes to its ship design, moving away from a cartoony style of ship to a much more detailed, gritty look, which is very common in Awakening and Rebellion. The lighting on the engines and the bottom side of the ship has also improved, and comparing from the old to the new designs, you can see that massive shift in thematics. Either way, I think it's a great decision. This ship looks like it belongs in Awakening and Rebellion now. And finally, the Quasar Fire comes in at 1,500 hull and 2,000 shields. Next up is the Liberator Cruiser. Equipped with a mixture of long-range weapons, the Liberator is able to fire from quite the distance, allowing it to support the fighters that they had just deployed. For this ship, it seems the textures just got a HD bump in look, because the original design was very monotone and the logos were just a little bit out of place. Whilst I do believe it's the same general 3D model with just a few caveats added in, the texture design looks so much more appropriate for this ship, and looks a lot better for it too. The Liberator Cruiser comes in at 7,000 hull and 5,000 shields. Next up is the Bakura Destroyer. Featuring a strong mix of weaponry, powerful engines and strong shielding, we can see the new design take on a much more lighter design in hull, as well as a full new 3D model and engine particles. The Bakura Destroyer comes in at 13,000 hull and 8,000 shields. Next up is the HF901 Freighter. While still using its same 3D model, the new textures give it a much more unique design, which is kind of lost on the old version, mostly because the old version looks a lot more darker and muddier, making making it kind of hard to identify exactly what type of ship it is. That problem no longer exists with the new HF901 design. Stats come in at 2000 hull and 0 shields. For our final ship design is the CORSEC Heavy Frigate. With the same problems as the HF901, the CORSEC Heavy Frigate just simply looked a little bit too dark, gritty and muddy, making it very hard to identify just exactly what ship it is. But with the new design and new model, it looks absolutely amazing. And might I add, this is a small ship. So it's amazing to see all this detail on something that you're going to be very zoomed out from. But just a little zoom in can show just how beautiful this ship is. The CORSEC Heavy Frigate comes in at 2000 hull and 2000 shields. Finally, we move on to all the building structure redesigns. And the first one being the Imperial Dockyard Warship. This structure has seen a completely new 3D model and design, and it looks oh so much better for it. Compared to its completely different old design, the Imperial Dockyard looks just like it should in the movies. You also have a level 2 and a level 1, which are just 2/3 and 1/3 of the initial full design. This is quite a departure from its old look, but this new 3D model is possibly one of the best looking changes in all of the 2.9 update. The stats are 16,500 hull and 11,000 shields. Next we move to the defense satellites. These have also had a huge 3D model redesign, removing the standard vanilla look to a much more unified design when picking missile or laser satellite. There are a few tiny changes in each 3D model, but they are definitely not noticeable when you're playing the game. Either way, a much welcome change and they look fantastic. Next up, we have the XQ3 custom station. This is a huge 3D model design, a much needed one too. The old one looked very flat and boring, and all of the textures kind of mushed together to make it look very bland. Whilst the new one has so many features like its advanced hangar bay and the incredibly detailed dome sphere on the top of the structure. The XQ3 custom station comes in at 4,400 hull and 4,000 shields. Next up is the tech station level 4 and 5. There is very minimal changes to the old and new designs here, just some texture changes to make it look a lot more in line with the rest of the designs in Awaken and Rebellion. Either way, not too much to talk about here. And finally, tech station levels 1, 2 and 3. Here we're seeing a completely new design in all three of them. Originally they looked more like the tech station level 4 and 5, but have been scaled down to a much more acceptable look. All three do share the same model, I believe, whilst also having the same animation. But besides that, that pretty much covers all of the visual updates from fighters to ships to structures, all seen in Awaken and Rebellion 2.9. Well, that pretty much wraps up today's video. What are your thoughts on the ship changes? And most importantly, the question of the day, what is your favourite ship change of them all? Let me know in the comments down below. I read all of them and I'll try to get back to some of you as well. Besides that, I've been Charlie, you've been watching EcksToo, and I'll see you in the next video. Take care, guys.